Hi, everyone.
Greetings. Page 82 of the Proclaimer's book. In the last two segments, we've seen how Rutherford got rid of the Russellites. First of all, the two organizations article, Birth of the Nation in 1925, and then taking on the name Jehovah's Witnesses, defying Russell, as it were, in both aspects.
Right.
And this section is entitled, Jehovah's Spirit Made Us Fearless. During 1927, Jehovah's people were encouraged to spend a portion of every Sunday in group witnessing. Immediate legal opposition was raised. Within a few years, arrests began to mount. 268 in the United States alone in 1933, 340 in 1934, 478 in 1935, and 1,149 in 1936. On what charge? Actually, on various charges, including selling without a license, disturbing the peace, and violating Sunday Sabbath laws. The local groups of witnesses were not versed in how to deal with police officials and courts. Getting legal help locally was either too expensive or not possible because of prejudice. So the Watchtower Society wisely established a legal department in Brooklyn to render counsel.
A strong legal defense, though, was not enough. These sincere witnesses of Jehovah were determined to live up to the name they had embraced. So early in the 1930s, they struck back by going on the offensive. How? By means of special preaching missions known as divisional campaigns. Thousands of volunteers throughout the United States were organized into divisions. When witnesses were arrested in one town for house-to-house preaching, a division of volunteers from other areas soon arrived and besieged the town, giving a thorough witness. Those divisional campaigns did much to strengthen the local witnesses. In each division, there were qualified brothers who had been trained to deal with the authorities. It was a great encouragement to the brothers living in a troubled area, perhaps in a small town, to know that they were not alone in proclaiming God's kingdom.
It took a great deal of courage to share in the divisional campaigns of the 1930s. In the midst of the Great Depression period, jobs were scarce. Yet Nicholas Kovalek, Jr., a traveling overseer for some 40 years, recalls, when the call came to cover a trouble spot, the service director would ask for volunteers. Individuals were told not to volunteer if they were afraid of losing their jobs. But we were always happy to see 100% affirmative response, observed John Dulcinos, an overseer from Springfield, Massachusetts. Indeed, those were thrilling years, and their memories are precious. Jehovah's Spirit made us fearless. Meanwhile, a flash of Bible understanding was developing that would have a tremendous impact on the work. And that's leading to the next subhead, which is, what about the Jonadabs?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what can we say about this, what they say is a going on the offensive? Well, where's the command in the New Testament, in the Gospels, for the church, that is disciples, to go on the offensive? I know if you're confusing this with apostles being sent, that's okay. They were sent. But where's the command for the disciples to go anywhere on the offensive, besieging towns?
Yeah. So it's strange that they would make such a point of this, besieged the town. It sounds like an assault. It doesn't sound Christ-like or
Gentle Jesus, make it mild, the Lamb of God? No.
The apostles were imprisoned, yes, and they were said to have filled Jerusalem with their teaching. But that's quite different than the way they're presenting it here.
Why are they being arrested? The first paragraph is pretty blunt about why they're being arrested.
Yeah, it included selling without a license. Well, I mean, if you had just been standing around talking to people about the Bible on a Sunday, you might not have had a problem.
What's the problem with? Well, they admit that they were encouraging them to spend a portion of every Sunday in group witnessing.
Yeah. So it's it's almost designed to get persecution going here, because people respected Sabbath laws in those days.
There's even laws here. It admits there's
Yeah.
laws about violating Sunday Sabbath laws.
Mm-hmm.
So, did they not know in these different localities that there was a Sunday Sabbath law?
Oh, I'm sure they knew. So, I think if they always try and project what they're doing with what the New Testament teaches was doing. But can you envision families going door to door doing something like this? Selling books. They certainly wouldn't be selling
So
materials.
you made the point that yes, the apostles in Acts were accused of filling Jerusalem with their teaching, but the only ones arrested
Are them.
are the apostles.
Can you just like picture in your mind, can you see the apostles with a kid beside them at the door, or families, or women? I mean it's just not that would seem ridiculous when you try and picture it.
Do they ever have pictures of the apostles or families in the first century,
No.
in first century dress, standing at their neighbors' doors?
No, what they show you is pictures of modern day witnesses with their whole family.
So why would
Out
they
in
not
field
show you
service.
pictures of the first century Christians standing at doors?
Because I think you would immediately think it looked strange, ridiculous.
So they would set up a dissonance that would be automatic in that
Just
kind
in
of
the
image.
picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
right.
you, like you just hinted, that do you really think that the disciples, the Jewish disciples in Jerusalem or elsewhere among the Jews, would have gone out canvassing on the
On the
Sabbath day?
Sabbath? No, they would have been arrested for that, and you don't hear any controversy about them connected with the Sabbath.
No, that's funny, isn't it? Because
It
the
is.
Synoptic Gospels are full of mentions of the disciples getting in trouble and Jesus getting in trouble for Sabbath violations, as
Yeah,
it was seen by the Pharisees, for instance.
but it was never because they were going door to door.
But Acts has no mention of any Sabbath
Yeah.
violations or any Sabbath controversy. So
Yeah.
you're just this is a narrative you're making up. This idea
Yeah.
that disciples need to canvass.
And this is where, if you knew something about the period of time, you would know this would not fly, because they had different social traditions and obligations for people. Women would certainly not have been going door to door,
Women,
because they weren't even allowed to speak to a man in the street.
we were struck by a verse that is right there in John chapter 4, right? What the disciples were astonished that Jesus was talking to,
A woman.
because Jews, males, did not talk to women. Women did not talk to men in public.
Yeah.
Maybe a man and his wife, of course, a member of the family, but we're talking about social intercourse here.
Yeah, they would not have been going and knocking on the door and talking to the man of the house.
And this was
At
not
the
just,
door.
of course, Judaism in the first century. This was cultures generally across the world, and
Yeah.
many of them still today. So the very fact that they were not under arrest, that is, the disciples of those days, except for the apostles and their co-workers, they were not under arrest. They were not being persecuted
There's
until much later.
No.
So they were not breaking the Sabbath regulations, and they were not exercising their freedom to break social
Yeah,
taboos
that's
either.
right.
And they were not using the name Jehovah, because they would have been arrested for that too.
Yeah, yeah. So there, it just doesn't seem like, it seems like you're putting yourself in a position where you will get persecution. So is that design?
Well,
Was that a design? They wanted to be persecuted, because then that kind of puts you in a position of, you think you're putting yourself in a position of a higher up to
yeah,
everyone
you're
else.
fulfilling prophecy in your own mind, right? And I don't doubt that Rutherford felt that way. And but on the other hand, I don't doubt that the brothers and sisters were sincere.
Yeah.
They thought they were obeying Jehovah. So we give them credit for
Yeah.
guts, but we don't give them credit for wisdom.
Yeah.
They're selling, as is very plain here, they're selling books.
Yeah.
Do we understand why Jehovah's Witnesses became recognized as a cult because they went door to door and did this kind of work, selling books of two men, C.T. Russell and J.F. Rutherford.
Yeah, and by this time it would have just been Rutherford's books that were being, with his name on them. So you're coming to everyone's door and pushing one person's publications on everyone. And if you'd read him, you can see why that would also not be advisable.
So all of this becomes a can we say, a radical rewrite of history.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't doubt they were fearless. Many of them were I met some of these people who were pioneers during that era, and they had a lot of guts and they had a lot of chutzpah, but they weren't gentle people. They tended to be very aggressive.
So besieged is the right word, because they would have been. I can think of who you're thinking of. There's a smugness and a kind of ridicule of other people, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter to you that you're being offensive. Name calling.
They caught J.F. Rutherford's spirit.
Yeah.
I picked that up myself just from meeting a few of the
people
older people who had lived through during the Rutherford era and the World War II era, and gone canvassing during that period. Mm-hmm. So and then they have the lead up in the very last short paragraph. A flash of Bible understanding was developing, and that's about, of course, the Jonadabs, the other sheep, another invention, another improvisation of J.F. Rutherford. And what's our link? Our link is the appendix to our door-to-door series, 6 videos entirely in that series, and the number 6 is the appendix, which is what was it entitled?
Are Christians commanded to witness or preach?
Which is an examination of Paul's 13 epistles to see if, among all the counsel that Paul gave to his churches, there was any indication that he expected them to
go out,
to witness or to preach.
Mm-hmm. And we'll put the playlist for that series, the door to door. And if you want a free PDF of where the material is from, because you're reading this off a tract, it's on our website, onewonders.org.
Next time, what about the Jonadabs? See you next time.